in 3 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Talofa? Oh, did it start already?
Yeah, girl, we live.
Okay. Cut this part out. Talofa my alofas. Welcome to this episode of Koviki Talk Takeover. I will be your host, Dacia Taleni, also known as Afrotane of the podcast The Real Totala. Today we have two wonderful guests and we will be checking in with each other. So this is kind of like a reunion for me of sorts because I have moved away and due to the pandemic, I have not been in contact with my friends like I would like to. So I am grateful for this time with my friends, and super grateful for Carl and Naki inviting us on to just have a tautala, just a Koviki talk with you folks. We will be checking in with each other, but sprinkled in to this awesome conversation will be some facts about COVID and boosters and vaccinations associated with COVID. So, our first guest that we have here is Alexandria Parker. Alexandra is a clinician, a storyteller, and researcher passionate about helping people obtain their highest good possible by embracing their agency and most authentic self. She holds a bachelor's degree in clinical psychology and a master's in social welfare. She currently resides in Southern California, where she practices as a licensed clinical social worker. She is a proud plant parent, which she's tried to get me to be a plant parent, but I kill everything I touch. And she enjoys exploring the world and discovering how much she doesn't know. Welcome, Alexandra. A few
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me and offering me a seat at the table for this very important conversation on a very important platform. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for being here. I'm super stoked that you're here. I'm also stoked that Tone Valle is also here. Thank you so much for coming, Tone. Tone was born and raised in Excelsior district of San Francisco. Tone's parents are from the villages of Ofu, Fitiuta, Manua, and Tone is a licensed clinical social worker as well. And he works at the Samoan Community Development Center and provides therapy to Samoans and Pacific Islanders in the San Francisco County. Welcome, Tone.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Glad you could be here. I love having both of you on. One, because you're both clinical social workers, you're both mental health professionals, and you both represent two demographics that I hold dear, right? So Tone represents that Samoan, community that we have in the Bay Area, in Alexandria, represents the, African American community or non-PI community as well, because I think it's important for us to kind of interact. We see a lot of PI conversations being held with just PI folks, but I think the exchange of information between people groups and cultures helps make both cultures better, and we work well, and we tend to live near each other anyways, so this conversation just makes sense to me. As an icebreaker, I wanted to ask you folks, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, which decade do you like the best and why?
Hmm.
Okay, Tone.
Okay, I can jump right in with this one. I'm gonna go ahead and just name them all. Right. So the 60s and 70s, I'll say I love that decade for the soul music that was out during that era. Because I was always that kid that was trying to figure out what the original sample was to that song on the radio. That's the kind of kid I was when I was growing up. But then I'll also say the 80s because I was born in the 80s. I'm an 80s baby, right? And then also, what I love about the 90s is, just a very nostalgic time that represents my childhood, growing up in this city. And there's just a lot of great music in the 90s too. So, we love them all. We appreciate all the decades.
Okay. So you like them all. And it's great that you highlighted all of because every decade has their thing, right? Alexandra, which decade would you latch onto, or do you share the same thoughts as Tone? Like, do you like all of the decades?
I do like all of the decades, but my first thought tone was like, I'm from the 80s. That's where I originated. But I was stomping in the 90s, okay? Like I had those are fun times. The 60s and 70s, music too, culture and stuff. I wonder if I would have survived with some of the socio-political things that were occurring, knowing my personality. Uh, so I'm along the lines of tone, but I can't forget the 80s and the 90s, baby. Can't do it. Can't do it.
Okay. I think I'm just going to choose the 90s. I was born in the 80s. So I was there for 3 years, but it's the 90s. To me, I like the 90s because we had that sense of innovation. We had technology. We had, we saw the start of the bubble that happened in Silicon Valley with floppy disks. We took the IBM computer and made it, we went to AOL. I just remember the evolution of that. So like technology was still fun. It wasn't this whole like menacing thing that causes anxiety. People were really connecting. And then I thought it was a true renaissance in terms of like R&B and rap in the 90s because it was truly new. Everything was truly new. What we have now, I think, is just a copy of a copy of a copy. And, the more times you copy something, the more degraded it becomes. So I will take the 90s. I still bump music from the 90s. I will still wear my overalls. People are still wearing overalls and Timbs and all of these things. So
Have
like
you
the
guys seen
90s.
that cross colors are coming back? You see people trying to rock the cross colors out there, dude.
Okay, so is fanny packs 80s or 90s?
Ooh.
Fanny packs are here. The retro glasses are here. I think people are moving more towards baggier clothes, the oversized clothes. That was a staple in the 90s as well. So I love what I know, and I know the 90s. And the snacks was snacking, and the food was real. Now we got to read every label, make sure they're not poisoning us. Oh, Lord. So for this conversation, we really want to take you through the lens of time, and that's why I asked that icebreaker question. I want to know from both of you, like, how were you dealing with COVID when it first came out a couple of years ago in the past? And then we'll move into like, hey, how do we deal with COVID now in the present, or just not deal with COVID? How do you deal with yourself now that COVID is here? Because it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. And if you would like to share first, Alexandria, since Tone was.
I'll default to Tone. Go ahead, Tone.
Oh, okay, we're defaulting to. How about I go first? I'll go first. So when COVID first came out, I was working in the health field and I was stressed out. I was taking emergency calls. People were crying. People were scared. People were making appointments because their toenail felt funny. So much of the unknown was encompassing people's brains. And, when it comes to things that are unknown, people are scared. And so I, on the other end of the line, who was supposed to be a reassuring voice, had to be calm while they were being very much ramped up. Every other message was like, so much misinformation. Some people said, oh, you don't need it. Oh, you do need the vaccine. Oh, so all of these things have happened. And I felt my anxiety just go through the roof. So much so that I left healthcare and I left the state. So that was me. I overworked myself. I worked 16-hour shifts, came home, slept for 2 hours, 3 hours, and went back to work. That was the reality for most health workers at the beginning of the thing. Now that we're here now, I can look back at it and be like, whoa, that's really unhealthy. But I was just overworking myself to the point where I didn't even sit to think if I was overworked or not. So that was my experience of, this whole COVID situation in the past. Alexandria, what say you?
My experience was a little unique, a little different because I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but I work in the hospital setting. So when everything shut down for everybody else, it just went times 10 for us. I was working in the ERs, in the ICUs, on the floors, in the clinics. So when people were coming down with COVID, we were helping to manage the situations. When people were coming in distress because they were struggling to cope with a lot of like the social and emotional parts that were going on. They were coming into the hospital, into the clinic. When they were at home and had no one to talk to, they were calling the hospital and the clinic. So my situation was way different to where I might have felt the anxiety, the uncertainty that was definitely at times overwhelming, but having no choice but to learn to move through it. During those things. And sometimes it was good and sometimes it was bad. Sometimes I coped well, sometimes I did not. And that's on the professional side, while still having my own family and our own considerations with my colleagues to consider as well. So that was then. Now, on the professional side of things, COVID is still here and alive. I'm still in the hospital setting. We do have a lot of like personnel shortages, so that still is impacting the hospital infrastructure and the medical infrastructure. So there's still some waning effects. I'll say it's not as intense as it was, but it is still challenging at times. So I'm still there, and I'm still negotiating for me how I'm processing everything.
Yeah, that's so interesting because both of y'all offer like perspectives from Dacia on the administrative side of the health of being in the hospitals, and Alexandria, actually being a social worker in the ER department. I just can imagine a lot of madness, right? Um, for me, I work in community mental health, and I remember the day that we got it. It was Friday the 13th, where we were told like pack all your stuff, right? Because on Monday you ain't coming back to work, right?
Mm.
You don't come back to work for a month, right? And I just remember being like, what the heck is going on? And we know so much more about COVID today, right? But just we didn't know anything about COVID at,
Exactly.
right? And Daisha, I know you'll probably get into it a little bit later about like all the stuff that we do know about COVID, right? But just thinking back to that time, we knew nothing, right? We were just scared, and I remember just thinking like, okay, a month, we can do this, right? And I remember making it to a month, and then they said another month, right? And then we got to that month, and then they said another month, right? And then when we got to that third month, they were like, I don't know when we coming back. I don't know when. And that's when I almost lost it, right? Because I didn't know there was so much uncertainty, right, about what this world and what will be like, and it changed the way we work too. I at the time I was working with young children and families, children under 5, and we had switched to telehealth, which means everything was through video and phone, right? And it's so challenging to engage a little kid through video,
Yes.
right? And all those challenges. And now the idea of interacting now virtually is so normalized now. Telehealth in the mental health field, right, is so normalized even for myself, right? And so yeah, just things. Yeah, we know. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for how much we know about COVID today, because we did not know anything back then.
We did it, and the uncertainty was really what kicked people either to be in lines at Costco for toilet paper for some reason. I remember the toilet paper shortage, the Clorox wipe shortage, the Clorox spray, the Lysol, all of these things. And Tony, you mentioned children, and I think that was the biggest concern. Well, that was one of the biggest concerns during that time, right? But now that we know more, um, when I first heard about COVID, people were like, kids don't have to worry. It doesn't affect kids.
Oh yeah.
But now you can't predict how COVID will affect kids if they get it. So they might be one of the lucky ones and just have the sniffles, but the risk for something much worse is super real. So according to my study, because I'm the Nancy Drew girl, I'm just finding out mysteries about COVID today. More than 16 million children under age 18 in the US have gotten COVID. And this year, kids under 5 have been more likely than older kids to be hospitalized with COVID. And so even children who don't need hospital care or just sometimes have symptoms that can last for months, they fortunately have a vaccine for children ages 6 months through 17 years that they can get protection of COVID from, or protection from COVID. So it's not going to cure you or make it so that you don't get COVID, but it does help lessen the severity that COVID can present within a person. And yes, so these vaccines, because a lot of parents will say, well, are these safe for children? And they've had clinical trials for vaccines for children ages 6 months to 11 years. And so they've tested it. They even vaccine children with lower or smaller doses. And these are available anywhere in any community. We do encourage that you do talk to your doctors, though. Talk to your pediatrician or your doctor, family doctor, about your kids and the vaccine as well, because we will give you facts, but we are not, well, I'm not a doctor, so I don't get a shot of something up here down there and then blame me. No. Afrotain, well, I'll be a chef before I'll be a doctor. So I wanted to read you folks some coping things that were coming out during 2020 or during the time of the big plague. I don't know. I try to make it sound ominous, but it is what it is. And one of the coping skills that an article presented was routine. Is that still something that people can hold on to now that the infrastructure of our society has changed? We're more telehealth, we're more staying at home. Does a routine benefit you past being a baby? Because I know babies love routine. But as you are clinicians now, does routine help you or does it bog you down?
I mean, you know what? I want to speak to this because I work so closely with young children,
Mhm.
right? And the thing about working with young children is that like a lot of the stuff that we work with young children around can apply into adulthood, right?
Okay.
And so routines are very important for young children because it creates predictability and certainty, and they know what to expect, right? And so it kind of works in the same way for us as human beings, right? When we are feeling flustered about what to do, right, we go to our routine, right? And so I would also even think of it as rituals, like, right, what are your morning rituals? What are your sleep rituals, right? What are these are things that create predictability and help you when you're in distress and you don't know when you're in distress. It's hard to really think logically about what to do to take care of yourself, right? But a routine is about discipline, right? And it's something you've thought of when you're it's something we can talk about now, right? And so
Mhm.
when we talk about it now, when we're not in a moment of crisis, right, we get into the practice of making it like habitual. And so when we're in crisis, we know how to tap into those routines, right? Because they've been a daily practice, right? And so it can be like routines are a great way to create predictability. I keep saying that, create predictability, and for us to like tap back into, especially when we're dysregulated or in moments of crisis.
I agree. That is good. I mean, I I look at routines as like, oh my god, I gotta do this over and over and over again. But when you mention it in times of crisis, when things are being shoved everywhere, you want to hold on to that thing that's grounded. And that thing might be, hey, I get up at 6 in the morning, wash my face, brush my teeth, put on my tennis shoes, let's hit the gym. Or it's like, let me wake up, read a book, make my tea, and then I'm ready for work, or say affirmations and things like that. Alexandria, what is a routine or something that you do regularly that grounds you?
Hmm. Something that I like started like being intentional about during like I call it the high COVID times was making, even if I just took like 3 minutes and I sat and did a meditation. And a meditation could be one that was guided, or I was just sitting calmly and focusing on my breathing for like
Mm,
3 minutes. I'm up to 5. See, look at that growth. But creating that space, that time, that routine, that has been very important to me. So, like to add on to what Tone was saying, I think routines can be helpful in coping, but we have to ask ourselves about our routines and how we're coping. Because if nothing else, I think like COVID, I don't care what you were doing during the time of it, you got the opportunity to kind of peek into yourself and ask, what is the routine?
oh my goodness.
For those of us that were out and about, whether you were working in the hospital or the grocery store, you had a different routine because you were coping with the uncertainty and the go, 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 rush, rush, rush. I have a job to do. I have a job to do. Very effective. It helped to a degree. It was even detrimental, but it helped you get through that situation. But it's not necessarily appropriate anymore for where we are now with the information that we have about COVID, with more society that has opened up, where we can return to some of our positive ways of coping and interacting and socializing, to where maybe some of the things we were doing as a routine before because we didn't have any other options isn't the best anymore.
Yeah.
But I do agree it can be very, very helpful.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Where were you two? Because I think you perfectly described what I was going. Well, I couldn't figure it out. Like I was using my routine of going to work as like my coping mechanism, and I was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna stay at work because this is the most stable thing. Like there's money to be made, and I'm in a place that has AC, so I ain't gotta run it in my place, and I'm working, you know what I mean? And I was working grave shift too, so it was quiet
Yeah.
for, once it passed like 7 o'clock, people stopped calling. And so I'm just like, oh, okay. But that makes sense. Like holding on to a routine is great until it's not. Um, and so I'm glad that you guys are giving us this information, because I think a lot of people are doing things that keeps them grounded, but now that it is no longer necessary, we shouldn't be overworking ourselves. We shouldn't be drinking as much or doing things as much that might not be healthy for us, but we utilized it to just stay level-headed. Then the other one of this thing, besides routine, is get some fresh air. That was one of the coping mechanisms for 2020, and I think it still applies for 2023. What say you, Tone?
Yeah, listen, the air is healing. All right. So, we need to be taking that in, right? I don't know. We could go so many places with this, but the air is healing, right? Go breathe in some fresh air, right?
Wherever
Go
you can
breathe.
find it.
Actually, go breathe first. Make sure you breathe in, right? Um, yeah, one more. I don't know what else to say, but like, go breathe the fresh air.
No, it's good. I don't pay attention to my breathing until I pay attention to my breathing. Sometimes I'll roll over in bed and just be like, I'm like, dang, how long was I not breathing? Like,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
then I sit and focus on my breathing, and then I'm just like, okay, I'm not hungry. I was just starved for breath. Okay, great.
No, and you just made me think though too, like the around fresh air. Like a lot of people were getting outside, right? Because that was one of the things we knew at the time is that you don't want to be indoors, right? You need to be in well ventilated places, or you need to be outside. So we could be outside, and that was that's one thing that we knew that we could be. I could talk to you. You had to be like 6 feet away, but if we were outside, we were at a lower risk. And you also saw people going out. Like I remember going for these morning hikes.
Oh,
Morning, right? There weren't a lot of people out, but I remember connecting more with outside with nature at that time, and that the parks became a popular place for people to convene. And so I think that was a pearl that people were able to get outside and breathe some fresh healing air and get in touch with the land too as well. So
I see you shaking your head on getting in touch with the land, Alexandra. Since you're the plant mama of the group, and we are your plant students, like what would your version of fresh air be like?
Oh man. Like I'm a green person. I just love anything green, green space, everything. So when you started talking about taking breaths, come on, Tom. Like there's so much that happens to us. Okay, I'm a nerd, so you guys should know this. There's so much that happens inside of our body system
mhm.
when we are taking quality breaths. It even the deeper we breathe, how it slows down our brain, it slows down our body system, and it allows us to regulate. It also allows us to pull different toxins and whatnot from our body and to exhale them back out. And it's so cool as you're talking about nature, because the thing that we need when we breathe, we're taking in from nature, we're taking in from creation. And when we exhale and we let it out, we're giving back to nature what it needs in order to thrive. So
Mm,
that's a part of that land connection. That's a part of like that healingness that's
mm,
there. So when we talk about coping and routines and getting out in fresh air, I think we got an opportunity with COVID to slow down and reconnect to ourselves, to each other. We had to be intentional about, how am I going to safely talk to you, right? How are we going to keep this relationship going? Because you can't come over my house. You can't come over my house. We can't get together. We have to figure this out. And then what does it look like for me to be connected to my space, my physical space, my community? So something as simple as going out and being in nature, in sunshine. Man, we get so much just from the sun, like our vitamin D levels that can help with feelings of depression. Like we can have vitamin deficiencies where it's coming from nature into us. So that idea of holistically caring for ourselves and how much that impacts one another, and then just our physical environment. So don't we be here all night, y'all. We will be
Well, I know I get a breath in. I know I'll touch nature if we're here all night. I love that. I think because where I am is a very industrial area. It's like downtown, and it's a concrete jungle, barely see any trees. So like when I get around actual like a nature scene, like my body automatically just says shut it down. Just watch the water.
mm,
Feel the ground. See that sun? That's not a LED light. That's
mm,
not your computer screen. That is something that keeps the earth the way it is. Like you'll notice how much more connected you are once you start being in nature. It's like, oh, I can't kill nothing out here because the bugs are where they need to be. They're bugging. The
yeah.
bugs are bugging, the rocks are rocking, and I am just supposed to enjoy nature. And the thing about taking in a breath is every breath you take, you have to acknowledge your existence. You just have to. You're not busy with work, you're not busy with life. When you're in nature and you just sit and you breathe, you're like, damn, why was I worried about my next TikTok post or why people are fretting online? Like I just think nature has a very wonderful way of calming us without having us to say anything. Now it depends on where you are, because if I see a bear, my nature is running the other way. But from this thing, it says fresh air, and then it goes into limit your exposure, embrace your inner homebody. So I feel like some of that stuff kind of goes against each other. So limiting your exposure is kind of like, hey, try not to be shopping for 4 hours in a packed grocery store. Try not to shake hands, and limit how you're close to people or with people in an enclosed area and things like that. I think that still applies now, but I think, have you guys noticed a change in attitude of folks? I see people going to Tulum, people going on trips as if COVID doesn't exist. What are your feelings about that, Tone? Like, have you noticed that, or am I tripping?
Oh no, yeah, because shoot, I've been going on trips too. Okay, I've been out there. Right, but as we were saying, like we know so much more about COVID today, right? And we understand the risk, the risk. We have a lot more information, and we understand the risks that we're taking, and we also know how to better navigate those risks. Right, and so first for me was like I want to make sure I'm when they said there's vaccination, I was like sign me up, right? When there's a booster, I was like boost me up, you know what I mean, right? Because that made me feel more secure, right? And traveling and getting out there, But I think I mean I think there's a lot of things that I took from COVID personally that in order to navigate the risk and safety and risk, right? And so for me, it was also about communication, right, and talking with people about like what are your kind of boundaries around how you've been navigating COVID, right? How what are you vaccinated, right? Right, because people feel different ways about being vaccinated. Some people are
Mhm.
like, yeah, some people are like no, right? And I know both of those, many on both sides. But we all deserve to have all the information we need to know in order to decide how we want to navigate either being around you, hanging out with you, or just the way we move outside of our home, and that takes being some transparency and communication around, whatever is important for you. Like for me, I want to know if you're vaccinated. I want to know if you've been if you got a cold. I want to know, right? It could be a cold, but it could not be too, right? So, but right, we all deserve to give each other all the information we need to know in order to decide for ourselves
Yes.
how we want to interact with you. So.
Thank you, Tone. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was taking trips too, and so I'm glad that you took you sat and weighed your options. You're like, oh, if I want to travel,
I did it after I was vaccinated.
I was just gonna say that. I was like, oh, you were weighing the differences, and you decided to get a shot before you took a flight.
Pause, comma.
First of all, let me get this record straight.
First.
How about you, Alexandria? Have you seen like a shift in how people respond to what COVID is now today?
I think there's a mix, like Tone was saying. There are those that feel certain ways. I think that's where we go back to routine again, right? What is it that was in our routine during the high COVID times that is still applicable now? And then how much can we use solid information and data that we didn't have before so that we can make educated and responsible choices about how to navigate? Because that's the thing. We're in a space where we are still in a pandemic, but we know that we're moving more towards it being endemic, meaning it's not going to go away. What we're trying to do is get the transmission rates and the treatment of COVID, to a point where outbreaks and different things like that are manageable. It is in the community, but it's treatable, and it's not resulting in the number of deaths or severe hospitalizations that are putting that strain on our medical infrastructure. So with the knowledge that you have about how to keep myself safe, how to lower risk, like how am I incorporating that as I'm getting back out into the world and renegotiating like what is normal, right? Because there's no way we can go back to 2019 or just January 2020. Things have changed tremendously, and they changed really, really fast. But that still doesn't mean that it isn't a viable risk or threat. I think a lot of what I have seen on the medical side is that it's not just, like Tone was pointing out, it's not just COVID. And it's hard to tell the difference at times, like in between what's going on. We have our babies that are going back to school, and we have like RSV that's coming up with the respiratory conditions, or just the flu. And even the flu before, for certain people, like was deadly. So what does it look like to take the knowledge about like lowering transmission, whether that's like continuing to wash my hands, masking when I'm in a certain highly densely populated area, protecting myself with a vaccination, right? And I know there's a lot of mixed feelings about vaccinations because of the information we were given about vaccinations. I know a lot of people felt a lot of ways about how quickly the vaccinations came about. The people that developed the vaccinations, and let's just be real, as we're sitting here as people that are of color, non-white, however you want to put it, we don't necessarily get all of the information, and a lot of times the short end of the stick when it comes to medical care, the latest in how to take care of ourselves and protect ourselves, even for access issues. So then you have something that's coming out and it's widely, really quickly and available. And it's like, how am I supposed to feel about this? How am I supposed to take this in? And so for healthcare workers, we did have like the option of, not even earlier, but we did have options before it became mandatory. And the conversations that we were even having amongst ourselves are, how do we weigh the risk and benefits of being vaccinated versus not? And for some people, they decided not to be. For other people, they decided the risk and the benefits outweighed the risk. For me personally, like I have older people in my family. I have immunocompromised people. I have immunocompromised patients that I work with. And for me, when I thought about it, like it wasn't even, what was so weird is that it wasn't even about my health, but my heart would have broken had I unknowingly transmitted the virus to somebody. Like that was the part that got me. So it wasn't necessarily about, oh, I want to make sure I'm alive, right? But it was more, what if I unknowingly expose somebody to something and their system can't cope? And so there are things that are still appropriate that I do still use. Like, I'm that odd person that you'll see with the mask and everything in the community. Tone, I get my trips too, right? But I got my N95 in the airplane, and I got my shades on, I have my barrier. I try to be wise about it so I can minimize my risk and my exposure as much as possible, because I see that taking care of myself and my health, it's not just about me, but impacts other people around me.
And I love that. And that's what I get from both of you is that yes, you want to take care of yourself, but part of taking care of yourself is knowing that when you take care of yourself, you're taking care of the people around you. And so that could be just a huge thing for folks like us who tend to help people around us, and people latch onto us because we're kind of stable. I know for a while I was calling Tone like, Tone, oh my god, get me off this planet. But I knew how to kind of self-soothe, even though it was working. But I think that is important to let people know, no matter where you are on the vaccination, not even argument, like spectrum, your perspective on vaccinations, just know that COVID-19 is still dangerous. It is still dangerous. Though we have a vaccine, updated vaccines that are available now, um, eh, depending on how you choose to take it or not take it, you still have to protect yourself by still washing your hands, still covering yourself, still wearing your mask. I live in Texas, and God bless their hearts, and their parts, but they don't wear masks. I don't see masks very often, and so we have a hookah phenomenon out here. They love hookah and blowing smoke up in the air, and I was just like, you are breathing in somebody's vapors. Somebody put their spittle. I don't know how often you guys use the word spittle, but spittle is in the air and you are breathing that in. Now, the hospitals in Texas have been overrun. There have been uptick of infections here. And what's crazy is you're not just dealing with coronavirus, you're dealing with Omicron, you're dealing with all these other variants. And so the shot you might have taken 2 years ago may need a little boost. So, updated vaccines are available, and an updated COVID vaccine can help restore protection that has waned over time from earlier doses. And then vaccine reduces the emergence of variants. So the more unvaccinated people there are, the greater the chance COVID has to spread and mutate into other variants. And I'm telling you, COVID is a mutant ninja turtle. It's like trying to hit a target that's changing how it looks every time it takes a step. So that's why it's been so hard to kind of get ahead of it, because one, our vaccination numbers were kind of atrocious at the beginning. It wasn't until people started suffering from the consequences that they were like, okay, all right, let me read and weigh my options. But I think we're getting better. And I I think the thing that concerned me the most was long COVID, and that's why I wanted to get the shot, because my sister, she had it and she still has the effects from having it. She had it severe, and just because you had it before doesn't mean you're going to be protected from future variants or even the same strain again. So, um, Alexandra, do you by any chance see a lot of patients in the hospital that suffer from long COVID, or have you heard of it?
Yeah. So, yes, is a short answer. In terms of long COVID, or even what's happening after an individual has had COVID, lingering symptoms, right? And the thing is, they're still finding out. So, like, if we just look at our older adult community, for some that have had COVID, it can lead to decline in functioning of our cognition, so of our brains and of our memories, that can predispose them to like things like dementia or Alzheimer's. Or you have long-lasting effects in the with their respiratory condition, with their respiratory functioning. Excuse me. And these are things that like researchers are still looking at people that are having other long haul symptoms. Like I know just in the LA County area, we have hospitals that have research components where they're still following people that are still having lingering symptoms that have they're just severely impacting their ability to even like perform daily functioning because they're completely winded, or to be able to manage certain things because they're still dealing with sort of like one of the symptoms they talked about, like almost like a brain fog that can occur, but it's still lingering. So it's not just the acute respiratory condition that it brings on and then it processes, but for some people in their systems, they're having these longer and lingering effects. And so that can bring up a lot of people. They're like, but some of these people, like, okay, you get vaccinated, you still contract COVID. Okay, very true. And like they showed, you were saying, there's different variants. But from what I've seen, is that for individuals who have been vaccinated, boosted, they kept up on it as much as possible. It's the difference between, okay, I contract severe COVID and maybe I need to go into the hospital. And we do have some medications that can help treat it versus I'm unvaccinated and I go into the hospital, I have no protection in my system, and I end up needing to be on a ventilator. Very different. And even in talking with some of my patients that have had to make that decision, they're like, I still had a horrible bout of COVID, but it literally, because of them, they had a lot of pre-existing health conditions, which is big in both the Black community as well as the Pacifica community. Like, we're high risk for high risk. We are. So all of that makes us a higher risk for contracting the virus, but also having severe COVID and possibly long haul symptoms. So there's a lot to take into effect. So that vaccination can be the difference between the your like your I don't want to say your survival of COVID, but the quality of your survival of COVID, if that makes any sense.
Yes, that makes perfect. I had to mute myself because I was like, yes, because that's exactly it. And I'm glad you mentioned our older folks, because I don't know about, your folks, but older folks in the Samoan community, in my experience, maybe not all older folks, but every older folk that I've talked to, it's just like, I know what I'm doing. I've survived through this and this. So they don't feel like getting a shot is necessary. But according to the CDC data, I think it's August 2022, I think adults 50 through, let me see, 50 through 64, I think, were over 7 times more likely to be hospitalized from COVID. And so I think, and these are unvaccinated adults, ages 50 to 64, were 7 times more likely. And I think that's a scary thing because, one, we don't want to pass these things on to our elder folks, so we get vaccinated. But then again, we may not. If you have an elder person who's active, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to bingo here and I'm gonna go to church here, do that, and they're not vaccinated. You know how our older folks in the Pacifica community, we're kissing both cheeks, we're hugging, we're sharing food, we're picking up kids, and all of these things. And I would hate for an elder to experience COVID because of them not being vaccinated, or maybe because they're asymptomatic, because that's one of them killers. Because they're asymptomatic with no symptoms, they end up being this kind of epicenter of a spread. And so I think it's super important to have the conversation with older folks. Have you had that conversation with older folks? It may not necessarily be your relatives, but just older people in general. How have you approached the conversation, or if ever, about getting vaccinated, Tone, with older people?
I mean, the only older people I can think of are my parents, who were definitely open to it. But I mean, I can even speak to, like, at the Samoan Community Development Center, that we had a COVID team there that was funded by the city for 2 years. They actually just ended. Their contract just ended at the end of last year. But bringing getting testing and vaccinations done at SCDC was about having our own people, right, be the faces of this, right, and say, like, hey, we're a part of testing, right, like, you can come here and do this, right. And I think, I mean, this wasn't specific to the elders, for the community at large, but I think it still applies, that it was important that we in our own community were out here uh, and doing the work and saying, "Come get tested." We'll test you ourselves, or we'll be the people that help you navigate that. And that happened at the Samoan Community Development Center for two years. Um, people getting tested, getting vaccinated, right? And then it went in waves too, where um, the people were more concerned that where there were spikes in numbers and stuff like that. So
Okay.
and then I will just say, like, too, like the whole thing around people dying and passing and not being able to go to funerals, right? There were like limited amount of people that were allowed to be there, right? That was really hard on the PI community, and how they grieved, right? And so that was just, it was, yeah, there was, those are one of the things that we had to think about in encouraging people to go get vaccinated, because some people would go meet anyways, right? Would convene anyways if it were about grieving the loss, or celebrating the passing, celebration of life of someone near and dear to their family. So, I mean, it's complicated, it's nuanced, and we had to, like, constantly be adjusting how we're engaging the community, where they're at. You know.
Yeah, I love the fact that the Samoan Community Center did that, because a lot of folks don't want to try anything new until they see people like them administering these new things, right? Like if I see somebody who's from my culture and they're not scared of the vaccine, it makes me more likely to go in and be like, "Hey, can you explain this to me?" Although we recommend you to talk to your doctor. But if you folks out there are wanting to get a vaccine, or you've talked about it, and you're ready to do it, you can go to vaccines.gov, or you could text your zip code to 438829 to find places nearby to get the vaccine. It is free, it's available regardless of your health insurance or immigration status. We don't care. We just care about your well being. We just care that you protect yourself as much as possible. And we don't want anything like that to be an obstacle in your way. So I just love that more and more places are opening up to address their specific demographics, because at first it was just like this full blanket thing, and they weren't really targeting the demographics that needed to be targeted. But I think because we did experience funerals, not being able to grieve, not being able to have closure, it was just like, no, I'm tired of seeing RIP and t-shirts and all these things come by, and I'm sitting here with the ability to get a vaccine, with ability to protect myself or even protect the people around me, and I'm not doing it. So it took me a long time to get the vaccine, to be very honest. I had to really think about it. I was coming off of a surgery, and there were so many people talking about side effects of the shot, and I was just like, I don't think I'm 100% to take those side effects. And so I had to wait until I felt I was fully healed, and then I went into it. But then other than that, my exposure is very low because I work from home. So for those people who commute or even take public transportation, like I really felt for them, because just because COVID's here doesn't mean you have to stop working. Doesn't mean you don't have to get up at 6 in the morning and catch those 3 buses to get to your job. And those are all 3 potential ways of being exposed. So I think it really hit communities of color, Black folks, PI folks, and then it really hit lower income folks, because it was just like, school shut down. My job's thinking about laying me off, but I still got to go to work. And nobody's here to watch these folks. So care, child care, all of these things have been changed by COVID. A lot of people think COVID just, it's just like the flu and nothing changed. No, everything changed. The way I do my work, the way I go enjoy my leisurely time, all of those things have changed. So I encourage you folks, again, go to vaccines.gov or text your zip code to 438829 to find places nearby to get a vaccine. If not, if you want to get to know more about the vaccine, hit up your doctor. If you don't have a doctor, you can get answers by visiting cdc.gov/coronavirus, but definitely talk to a health professional. But I love this conversation. I just don't want to dive too deep into the COVID thing because we could spiral. This is my talk with my friends. And so we've covered the past in terms of like how we handled it in the past. We've checked on how we're doing now. What are your plans for the future? And any one of you can ask. It could be anything. It could be something exciting, or you'd be like, oh my gosh, I got to trek across the country to go pick up my sister because she don't drive or something like that. So what are plans for the future?
I'm trying to be like Tone and go on more trips. Let's say that first and foremost. I'm gonna see we got to travel. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I'm trying to go on more trips, but things that are going on now. Things that are going on now. A little, not right now, but later on, I am going to be opening my own practice. It's going to be gauged along like number one, helping people find mental health resources and support, also providing it. So that'll be coming up in April, and it's called breathing space. We've been talking about breathing.
Yeah.
It just married so well. So I'll be doing that in April. And I'm also going to be participating in some other like ways to use creative content to provide a little bit more information and a little bit more accessible way around like some of the things that we were talking about today during this discussion. So definitely have to keep you guys posted and in the loop.
Please do. I would love to give your services out to folks. I do know that sometimes PI or Pacifica folks don't want to go to a Pacifica clinician because they feel they're connected to the community. I was like, oh, if I tell Tone, the Tone gonna tell his family, everybody's gonna look at me sideways, which is not the case because Tone is very professional.
Yeah.
Confidentiality on key, but I do notice that like some PIs hesitate to go get help because they don't want to talk to somebody who might be familiar with their family. And so, Alexandra, we wish you all of the success. Please keep us posted, and we would be down to just post your information because we need more Pacifica people to go out there and get help. I mean, you can't just all go to Tone. So we need to share the load. And it might surprise you when you're speaking to a clinician that is not of your culture. Like, you know, you might get a different perspective. You might feel a little more apt to sharing. So for Tone, what is your plan for the future? It could be anything that you're excited for, or something you're creating. What does the future hold for you?
I mean, right now, I'm just heavy into the community stuff around mental health and the Samoan and PI community. So just looking to do some more education and around what mental health is in our community with our youth um, and get more engaged in what that looks like. And so that's exciting. And I think, well, actually, I want to plug on Monday, and we'll be doing a virtual presentation of our community needs assessment Kapasafetu that we did on the strengths, needs, gaps, and gaps of PI youth in San Francisco, where we surveyed and we did talanoas, talks, and interviews with PI youth, caregivers, community leaders to identify what those strengths, needs, and gaps are with our youth. And we made a bunch of recommendations, and so we'll be presenting our findings and recommendations virtually. We did an in-person one already, and that worked. I'm excited about that because a lot of stuff that came up was around mental health as well, and the kids too saying, we can't talk to my mom and dad, I don't know who to talk to, and this and that. And so it really just gave me a boost of energy to get out there and continue spreading the word around what mental health, and also a lot of people don't even know what mental health is. Right. So I'm like, we're not even trying to get you connected to therapy. We're just trying to get you to know what mental health is. Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Before we can even get there. Right.
Yes.
So
I'm excited. I'm excited for you and what you're doing. I really am. I apologize for pouncing on this, but I've been on this whole kick of disaggregated data, and the fact that PIs are researching PIs to help PIs makes so much sense to me. And both of your works and your future works are important. Period. Like opening up a private practice called Breathing Space. Hello, I need it. And
Yeah.
then getting data, specific data to help inform our people, to help guide our people, to help treat and heal our people. How are we friends, y'all? How do I know you? I just this lovely person. I'm just so glad that I'm in communion with you guys, in community with you guys, and that I've also learned from you folks. Um, for me in the future, I'm just trying to live, trying to survive. Maybe get lighter in terms of heavy, because my beauty's heavy, but I just appreciate you folks so much, and the future in my future I hope to connect with y'all more. The Houston, Texas PI community is very scarce for me. I don't see any PIs around. And so I think I want to get back more connected to people, but I'm not gonna lie, being away from the work, being away from community organizing has helped me tremendously. I feel good. I think that was my coping, was to like reduce my 16-hour days to 8-hour days and just live life, because we only got one life to live. So let's live it with what Alexandria said, with quality. With quality, let's touch some grass,
With
get
joy.
outside, breathe the air. No drama. Like life is already drama. Let's not add more to it. But I
Yeah,
thank you.
Dacia was working 18 hours and then doing her podcast and then making a dress. And
Right?
then,
You see her on her IG. She was like, I just did this last night, guys. I'm like, what?
You see how these mental health professionals just be turning on you? Oh, so okay. All right. All right. But I am eternally grateful for both of you gracing this platform with your presence, with your words. I'm sure somebody heard something that resonated with them so well that they're going to take that and spread it on and on. So this is just a place where we create ripples and we get to see where it goes. So again, thank you, Alexandria. Thank you, Tone. And thank you, Koviki Talk. And this is your takeover with your girl Afro Tene. Goodbye, my LFS.